Imagine for a second that you are standing on the platform of this sprawling, echoing train station.
Right, just a massive space.
Yeah, exactly. You've just bought a ticket. And you look up at that massive glowing digital departure board to find your track. But instead of a city, instead of Paris or Tokyo or New York, the destination line next to your train is completely blank.
Just nothing there.
It just reads non-existent. And the estimated time in transit, 40 years. The doors slide open. Like, do you step inside?
I mean, it's a completely paralyzing thought experiment, isn't it?
It really is.
We are just so hardwired to demand a destination before we commit our time, let alone, 4 decades of it.
Oh, absolutely.
The idea of embarking on a journey purely for the sake of the duration, with absolutely no promise of arrival, I mean, that goes against every single survival instinct and productivity hack that modern society has drilled into us.
Right. And that deeply unsettling but incredibly mesmerizing scenario is the mission for our deep dive today. We are stepping entirely out of the fast-paced, plot-driven noise of the modern world.
It's a much-needed break, honestly.
It really is. We've got a really unique stack of sources today. We're looking at the primary text of a fascinating 2026 novel, plus several literary critiques attempting to decode it, and a handful of philosophical essays exploring the physics of its universe.
It's a heavy stack.
Yeah, we are unpacking Daniel A. Freedman's highly acclaimed, incredibly strange work, The Moth's Notebook, Krasznahorkai. What remained of Krasznahorkai's coat after 40 years of living.
And to set expectations for you listening, we really need to establish what kind of literary space we are entering here. Friedman's book invents this rare hybrid genre.
Yeah, the critics had a field day with the labels.
They really did. The critiques describe it as an avant-garde metaphysical allegory, a piece of sensory prose poetry, and a contemplative metabook.
Which is quite a mouthful.
It is, yeah. But basically, it's heavily focused on the phenomenology of time, the texture of slowness, and the weight of memory. So, this isn't for casual plot chasers.
Definitely not a beach read.
No, not at all. It's built for lovers of slow literature and fans of existential heavyweights like Laszlo Krasznahorkai, who is actually a character in this book, surprisingly, and Samuel Beckett, W.G. Sebald, and Franz Kafka.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because before we dive into the actual story, we should probably translate some of that literary terminology for those of us who, don't have a PhD in philosophy.
Fair point, yeah.
When the critiques call it an avant-garde metaphysical allegory and say it explores the phenomenology of time, what does that actually mean in plain English? Like, how does that change the way we read this?
Well, let's break that down. A metaphysical allegory basically means that the physical laws of this universe are dictated by abstract ideas rather than, say, gravity or physics.
Okay, so ideas have actual physical weight.
Exactly. For example, a heavy memory might physically weigh down a train carriage. And the phenomenology of time simply means focusing on how time actually feels to experience rather than, what the clock says.
Right, because time is relative to our experience.
Yeah, we all know that 5 minutes spent waiting for a scary medical test feels like an absolute eternity, while 5 hours at a great party just vanishes in a second.
Oh, totally.
So phenomenology basically asks, what if time was entirely measured by those internal feelings, rather than minutes and hours?
Okay, wow. That completely reframes things. So in this universe, emotion and memory are the actual forces of gravity.
Yes, exactly.
That makes the inciting incident of this book so much more powerful, I think. Let's paint the picture of how this 40-year journey actually begins.
It's such a beautiful opening scene.
It really is. It is a misty, cold autumn morning at Gula Station. The author, Laszlo Krasznahorkai, is standing on the platform wearing a dark, slightly worn, heavy wool coat.
Very atmospheric.
Very. And out of the freezing air, this tiny, unforeseen moth flies directly into the deep inner fold of that coat. It finds a space that is dark, warm, and smells of rain, old pages, and silence.
And that tiny, seemingly insignificant event is what sets the next 4 decades into motion. Because Krasznahorkai boards that train we mentioned at the start, the one where the destination is an empty line, and the transit time is 40 years.
Okay, I have to pause and push back on this, because boarding a train for 40 years with a literally empty destination board triggers a profound, visceral fear for me.
Oh, it's terrifying.
It sounds like a modern nightmare. If you aren't going anywhere, aren't you just trapped in a moving prison? I mean, it feels like the ultimate manifestation of the fear of wasting your life.
It is terrifying, yeah, but only if you evaluate it through the lens of achievement.
Okay, how else would you evaluate it?
Well, the philosophical essays we looked at highlight how Friedman's text counters that fear. The book suggests that the empty line is actually and this is a quote, more real reality than any word.
A more real reality.
Yeah, think about it. A named destination like London or success or retirement always demands a specific outcome. It sets an expectation that you can fail to meet.
Oh, I see.
Emptiness, on the other hand, never demands anything. The text explicitly says, when there is no station, a person sees the path for the first time.
Because you aren't constantly looking past your current surroundings to see if you've arrived yet?
Precisely. Emptiness here doesn't stop the journey. It opens the road. It liberates the traveler from the anxiety of arrival.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because the destination is removed, the spaces between the stations become the primary focus of existence.
And the places they travel through are entirely untethered from normal geography, too.
Oh, completely.
The train never arrives at conventional cities. Instead, the critiques point out how it travels endlessly through small, forgotten stations that operate on, like, dream logic almost.
Yeah, it's a perfect way to describe it.
Can you walk us through how the physical world of this train journey actually operates?
Well, the landscape is shaped by that metaphysical allegory we discussed earlier. They pass through stations without directions, where the platform is just a vast field of pure nowhere.
Wow.
And there is a station where clocks sleep without hands.
Let's unpack that specific image for a second. Clocks sleeping without hands.
It's very surreal.
It is, but why? Because if we are in a universe governed by the phenomenology of time, by how time feels, then measuring it with ticking hands is completely obsolete.
Exactly.
The clocks dream of a time that no longer needs precision because the passengers are experiencing pure duration.
That is the exact mechanism at play, yeah.
Right.
And there is even a station where detached shadows gather in the darkness to hold counsel, which we will definitely explore in a moment.
I can't wait for that part.
But first, we have to address the core mechanical genius of the book. You have this vast, surreal 40-year metaphysical journey through time and memory. But the one documenting this epic odyssey is a tiny insect hiding in the pocket of a wool coat.
Right.
Like, how is the moth recording this?
This is my absolute favorite concept from the sources. The moth becomes the chronicler of the era through a physical act called writing with holes.
It's brilliant.
I kept thinking of it like an antique punch card computer from the 1960s.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Yeah, but instead of encoding mathematical data or banking information, this tiny moth is encoding pure philosophy, memory, and sensory experience directly into the fabric of the coat.
The punch card analogy works so well because it perfectly illustrates the mechanism. The text goes out of its way to clarify that the moth is not eating the wool out of hunger.
Right, it's not a pest.
Exactly. It has absolutely no desire to destroy the garment. Making holes is its inherent biological act of recording.
Wow.
The holes literally become windows, bridging the inner world of Krasznahorkai's heavy, meditative thoughts and the outer world of the train and passing landscapes.
And the level of detail the moth captures through these holes is just staggering. It's not just taking a snapshot of what things look like.
No, it's much deeper than that.
It's acting as a highly sensitive receiver, capturing frequencies.
The moth's body operates as a fine-tuned metaphysical instrument. Every time Krasznahorkai has a thought, the moth perceives it as a shift in temperature and color.
Which is so poetic.
It really is. The book outlines this sensory system beautifully. When the author dwells on the past, the friction of memory causes the fabric to grow warm to the touch.
I love that.
And when his mind drifts to the future, the wool turns incredibly cool, reflecting the void of the unknown.
And what about the present?
Well, when his thoughts finally settle into the present moment, the sensation falls into a stillness, so profound it feels like suspended air. The moth meticulously chews a specific shape of hole to encode that exact state of being.
And there is a moment between the man and the moth that just broke my heart because it involves such a beautiful, unspoken pact.
Oh, the validation scene.
Yeah. If you or I felt a moth eating a hole in our favorite jacket, our immediate instinct would be to swat it away or crush it, right?
Gross.
But when Krasznahorkai reaches into his pocket and feels a new, fresh hole with his fingers, he doesn't brush the insect off. He lingers on the frayed edge of the wool and he whispers, "Write. Keep writing. You hear this world correctly."
That moment of validation is really the emotional anchor of the entire first half of the book.
It gave me chill.
It fundamentally reframes reality for both characters. The moth suddenly understands its purpose. It realizes it was created for writing, not destruction.
Right.
And Krasznahorkai realizes He finally has a witness to his internal state. Someone is finally reading the invisible weight he carries.
Which brings up a quote from the text that the literary critiques highlighted repeatedly. The world consists not of great events, but of small stations.
Yes.
The moth is acting as a chronicler of things human history usually ignores. The unvoiced history of forgotten factories, smelling of tired metal, ancient fields where the grass lies flat under the wind, villages glowing with a pale yellow despair.
It elevates the mundane to the mythic, really. But the act of the moth recording these things isn't just passive journaling.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting, folks.
Yeah, this is where the metaphysical mechanics of Freedman's universe really take over. The moth is not just a dash cam silently recording the dark. The very act of writing with holes actively alters the physical reality around them.
This is where my mind was completely blown. The act of observation causes surreal transformations, and the most vivid example of this is Krasznahorkai's shadow.
Oh, this part is wild.
At a certain point in the journey, the ambient light in the carriage shifts, and his shadow literally detaches from his physical body.
It just walks away.
It slides across the floor, steps out of the train doors first at a strange station, and leaves him completely shadowless for a long stretch of the journey.
Yeah, just completely gone.
I have to say, if my shadow physically detached and walked away, I would feel an existential terror. Isn't that like losing a fundamental piece of your identity? It feels like losing your soul.
What's fascinating here is that it's entirely natural to view it as a loss or an abandonment, right? Especially in Western literature, where a lost shadow often symbolizes a loss of humanity.
Exactly, like Peter Pan or something.
Right. But Friedman's universe operates differently. The philosophical essays dive deep into the mechanism of this event. The shadow isn't abandoning him to diminish him. It goes out first because, as the text notes, sometimes the path knows only that which has no form.
Let me make sure I'm grasping the logic of that. Because the stations they are visiting are so emotionally and metaphysically heavy, the physical body can't handle the initial impact.
Right.
So the shadow has to go out as a sort of formless scout to map the emotional terrain before the body can endure it.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. The shadow represents the unformed, unconscious self. It can navigate spaces the conscious mind isn't ready for yet.
That's incredibly deep.
And the proof that this isn't an abandonment is what happens when they reach the station where shadows gather. Krasznahorkai's shadow eventually returns to him.
Right.
But it doesn't come back as a subservient two-dimensional copy pasted to his heels. It returns as an equal.
Wow.
It sits beside him on the velvet train seat. And eventually, the shadow begins to glow with a soft, milky light.
That imagery is just stunning, a glowing shadow.
The text provides a profound explanation for this mechanism. A shadow becomes light, not when light conquers darkness, but when darkness finally accepts itself.
Oh, wow.
It's a literal manifestation of integrating your unlived history and your deepest fears. Once you stop running from the dark parts of yourself, they become a source of illumination.
And it isn't just the shadow that comes alive and participates in this journey. The train itself is sentient.
Yes, the train is essentially a character.
It is not just a machine made of iron, wood, and glass. There is an incredible scene where the train becomes aware of the tiny moth inside the coat.
I love this scene.
The train shifts its vast, ancient, metallic weight, inclining slightly, and it speaks to the moth in what the book calls a structural language. The train recognizes the insect not as a pest, but as the organ of memory.
The mechanics of how the train operates are entirely dependent on that recognition. The critiques point out that the train realizes the moth possesses an internal map.
But not a normal map.
Right. This isn't a map of geographical coordinates, longitude and latitude. It is a map of memories, feelings, and sensory frequencies.
Right.
And in this universe, memory creates actual physical gravity. Because the moth has mapped the emotional weight of their journey, the train actually creates a brand new track in real time.
It's bending reality.
Exactly. This immense groaning machine alters its path, laying down new rails into the void, entirely guided by the emotional map of a single tiny passenger.
It is such a moving concept, the entire universe bending its physical laws to accommodate the smallest, most observant presence. But as they travel, the physical world does take a toll.
It has to, yeah.
Over the course of 40 years, the heavy wool coat ages, the holes multiply. But the coat doesn't just fall apart into useless rags. The text gives us this deeply resonant line: real life is not renewed, real life wears out.
It is arguably the defining philosophy of the novel. Aging, wear, and tear are not framed as destruction or decay here. They are framed as an illumination from within.
How does that look visually in the book?
Well, as the fabric of the coat wears thin, the friction of the journey causes it to literally glow with the accumulated weight of thoughts and recorded memories.
That is beautiful.
The wornness becomes a language of its own. The physical coat transforms into a museum of the road.
But logically, a piece of fabric can only endure so much wear before it ceases to be a coat. And a 40-year journey, by definition, must eventually hit year 40.
Right, it can't go on forever.
Which brings us to the structure of the book itself. Because everything we have discussed so far, the sentient train, the autonomous glowing shadow, the 40-year mythic journey, all of this happens in just Notebook 1.
Yeah, that's just the beginning.
The book is structured across 4 distinct notebooks. So how does the narrative logically transition when the physical movement finally stops?
Well, the transition across the 4 notebooks is a brilliant progression of consciousness. It's driven entirely by causality. Because the code is physically exhausted and the 40 years of movement are spent, the nature of the experience has to evolve.
Right.
Notebook 1, titled Folds. Memory is the active mythic journey we just explored. But then the narrative shifts into Notebook 2, titled Residue, State.
And the atmosphere shifts dramatically there. In Notebook 2, the train has finally stopped. The kinetic energy of traveling is gone. But the memory of the journey doesn't vanish. It remains as a physical residue.
This notebook explores the mechanics of presence without witnesses.
What does that mean?
During the train journey, there was constant interaction, the shadow leaving and returning, the train bending its tracks, the landscapes passing by. There was always an external object to define the self against.
Oh, I see.
In Notebook 2, silence is the only thing that answers. Duration becomes a pure state of being rather than the passing of time. The characters exist in a place without coordinates, liberated from the need to prove they are still moving forward.
It sounds incredibly peaceful. But then we slam into Notebook 3, which is ominously titled Failure, Navigation.
Yeah, brace yourself for this one.
It is a jarring, violent shift in tone. Suddenly, the moth and the body are forced out of that silent state and must navigate the sharp, noisy, demanding outside world.
It's chaos.
There are rigid physical boundaries, foreign rhythms imposing themselves, and voices demanding immediate attention. When I was reading this section, I kept thinking of it like spending 40 years in a completely silent, isolated sensory deprivation tank, and then instantly being teleported into the middle of Times Square at rush hour.
That visual captures the sheer sensory overload they experience perfectly.
But here is where I struggle with the underlying logic of this section. The notebook is literally titled Failure.
Right.
In the face of all this overwhelming modern noise, does the metaphysical magic they built over 40 years just break? Like, how does a moth or a contemplative author experience failure in a crowded, demanding society without it just being a depressing defeat?
It's a crucial question. And the philosophical analyses we reviewed spend a lot of time on Notebook 3. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the failure being described here is not a defeat of the spirit or a collapse of the magic.
No.
It is the necessary failure or dissolution of the ego.
Oh, okay. How so?
When you are in a silent state, like in Notebook 2, it is easy to maintain your boundaries.
Because there's nothing pushing against them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in the noise of the world, the moth and the author have to navigate external pressures. At first, they try to control their sensitivity. They try to brace themselves against the noise, to anticipate the world's demands and protect their inner silence.
Which sounds exhausting.
It is, and that resistance fails. The breakthrough happens when they realize that true navigation requires letting the noise pass through them.
Wow.
They allow the loud, demanding world to exist without letting it dictate their internal frequency. It's about learning to move through society without oneself meaning, interacting with the world, liberated from the need to constantly center your own identity, defend your ego, or prove your importance.
So it's the failure of the need to be important, the failure of the ego's defense mechanisms.
Precisely.
That is profound. And that complete dissolution of the ego sets up the final section logically and perfectly.
It really does.
Notebook 4 is titled Echo, Surface. It is hauntingly short and incredibly poetic. It describes a space of pure, weightless surface and absolute silence, a place where nothing begins.
It's so beautiful.
The traces of the 40-year journey just vanish, not because they are forgotten or forcefully erased, but because they simply no longer need to be held onto.
Notebook 4 answers a massive philosophical question about the nature of completion. Like, what happens when a journey is truly over?
Right.
Movement becomes pure presence. The text doesn't offer a traditional climax or closure, it simply stops holding on. It represents the ultimate acceptance of impermanence.
Letting go of the ego, the journey, everything.
The characters reach a state where they don't even need the physical memory of the journey, the worn-out coat, the holes to validate their existence. They just are.
It's a breathtaking arc. From desperate movement to silent residue to the death of the ego in the real world, and finally, to pure presence.
It's a masterpiece.
Bringing this all back to you, the listener. We live in an ecosystem that is violently obsessed with speed.
Constantly.
We are addicted to our notifications, to relentless productivity hacks, to constantly proving our worth by how fast we can arrive at the next big milestone. We panic when the destination board goes blank.
We really do.
But Daniel E. Freedman's book offers a radical, almost subversive counter-narrative. It argues for the immense, world-bending power of slowness. It champions the art of noticing the quiet spaces between the destinations.
And the underlying mechanics of this story teach us that true, meaningful movement isn't always about relentless forward momentum.
Right.
Sometimes the most profound movement happens when you cease to fear staying exactly where you are. It's the realization that your own focused attention, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, like a moth taking shelter in a pocket, generates enough emotional gravity to literally change the tracks of the world around you.
So what does this all mean for you? The universe responds to the depth of your observation. Next time you feel that rising panic of the high-speed train, the anxiety of the ticking clock, and the demand for a destination, I want you to ask yourself this.
It's a good question.
It is. If your life were being recorded today, not by your grand achievements, your resume, or the specific destinations you reached, but rather by the holes, the quiet, unnoticed spaces of pure presence, observation, and slowness you left behind, what kind of text would your life form? And in the vast, silent architecture of the universe, who or what is currently reading it?